Welcome back. Maybe this is the moment that changes everything. Roy Moore, Al Franken, Harvey Weinstein, and now Charlie Rose. The number of rich and powerful men from the world of entertainment, politics, journalism, who have not only fallen from grace, but whose careers have met a sudden and perhaps permanent end has been stunning. But as women on the Suncoast and throughout Florida and across the nation know, this isn't a new phenomenon. It has gone on for years, seldom making the headlines, but making an indelible impression on the lives and the careers of countless women. And joining us for more is an employment attorney, Sarah Blackwell, and Kevin Cooper, the president of the Greater Sarasota Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to you both.
Thanks for having us.
Sarah, I'm going to start with you because there is a problem a lot of victims have in terms of relating to other people, women and men, their experiences, because when you settle these cases, sometimes there's basically a gag order on the victims from discussing these cases.
Most severance agreements, when you settle a case, there is a gag order saying you can't tell anyone anything negative about the company, anything that happened, anything about the settlement agreement. So if there is someone in the company that has sexually harassed a woman and it's been settled and she can't speak, and then it happens to another woman, that first woman can't say anything to the next woman or the next woman. So if the company's smart, they get rid of the person who's harassing, but if the person is someone pretty high up that's never going to lose a job, those women, all those victims, may know what's going on, but they're not legally allowed to say anything, and if they do, they'll lose everything that they received in the severance and maybe even more for breaching the contract.
Why hasn't the legal industry and lawyers who are concerned about this apply pressure to get rid of these types of gag orders?
Those gag orders are common for every kind of severance or settlement, whether it's discrimination based on race or the American workers type thing. Every settlement that I've dealt with employment, we always include that. If the employee doesn't want it, then the price or the amount is either higher or lower, or it's a no deal. Because if I settle, then I want the whole, if I'm an employer and I settle it, I want the whole issue to go away. If it still stays around and you can talk about it, then it doesn't do the employer as much good.
Kevin, how has businesses changed in terms of the way they approach these cases, and why does the business community, I know you don't speak for the entire business community, but why isn't there a move to get away from these gag orders so a lot of these situations can be more out in the open?
Well, I think there's two questions there, and I think the business community has become a lot more aware of it, and I think sexual harassment policies have become a lot more common in the workplace as people understand the different types of sexual harassment, how it can impact business, and let's be honest, there's a huge liability on the employer's plate, especially in the place of quid pro quo type of sexual harassment. They can be held liable for these type of things. Now, from the gag order piece, it is hard, as Sarah mentioned, in any type of severance package, anytime, and this can be outside of any type of discrimination or harassment. If you're talking about, breach of contract, any type of thing, those are just parts that are in there, and that can be beneficial to both the employee and the employer. You don't want a former employer talking about, oh, well, this employee did this and this employee did that. So it works kind of both ways. So the stigma on both the employer and the employee don't persist after whatever type of issue may have arose, but also from the employer standpoint, a settlement is not an implicit a statement of, hey, we did something wrong. It is, we are moving away from this.
But it has been used in some cases, and I'm thinking about Bill O'Reilly over at Fox, that the company absorbed the payouts in order to protect a very valuable asset. So if you have, locally a CEO or high-level executive involved with this, sometimes the company does not want to lose the services of that individual.
Well, I think it comes down to whether or not the employer was liable. And the employer might make a decision to move away from the situation, whether or not they were liable. If you know, if a culture is pervasive, or you should have known, or you did know that sexual harassment was occurring, then the employer is certainly liable. And that is, if you go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they will state the fact. But employers might make decisions where they are not liable for what was going on and move away from that in ways that may seem subversive, but they're really not.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on sexual harassment in the workplace right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about sexual harassment, not in Hollywood or in Washington, but right here on the Suncoast. And joining us for more is employment attorney Sarah Blackwell and Kevin Cooper, the president of the Greater Sarasota Chamber of Commerce. Sarah, you're in a unique position because you represent women who are alleging sexual harassment. You also represent companies trying to defend themselves from it. And, you know, all these cases from Washington to Hollywood are really starting a national debate over this. And I would imagine that, you know, there's a difference between whether it's a business executive at a local business or a Hollywood producer or a politician. There is a personality that is involved in terms of a lot of these cases, but you also have individuals who may not even be aware what they're doing is over the line.
Well, when you're dealing with sexual harassment, there's two types. Quid pro quo, I'm going to give you a promotion if you give me something. And then there's hostile work environment. Hostile work environment is severe and pervasive. So if something's severe, like they do something very awful, and they'd have no doubt that they did something awful, one time's enough. But pervasive's like little off-colored jokes, maybe comments about how you look. After a while, it becomes so pervasive, it becomes a hostile work environment. So in those situations, like men who don't understand that they are crossing a line, it's usually not the severe, it's the pervasive. But the way that the employer can protect themselves is there's a very strong defense in the law where they just have to have a sexual harassment policy that I would recommend that all employees are required to sign. The harassment policy says no unwelcome, unwanted advances, comments, but if you have a problem as an employee, you have to tell one of two people and you have to name the two people. So if you were making comments to a woman and you didn't realize she didn't like it, and she never complained to anyone, then the employer has a really good defense to say, you know, no one knew that this was offensive to you. The other thing is it has to be unwanted and unwelcome. Some women don't get offended by it, and there is no issue and no problem. So I think you have to look at each situation. Again, the higher up that the person is, the more liable that the employer would be. A coworker is different than the boss, is different than a customer that comes in. So you have to look at who the harasser is as well.
Kevin, we have all been, every time we've gotten a new job and start at a new company, we are given the sexual harassment policy. We all have to sign this. But what are companies doing now locally differently than they used to in terms of training their employees, in terms of what not to do and how to handle situations like this?
Well, I think that's a great question because if nothing else comes from this, anybody that's watching this as a local employer, if you do not have a policy, get a policy.
And there's still companies out there that do not have policies?
Don't have
They
policies.
don't, and especially the smaller the companies, sometimes the more they think, oh, that's not really this, it's not, it has nothing to do with employee size. A 300 employee company is just as liable as a 3-person employee company. But I think to your question about what employers are doing differently, I think it's about an education piece. It's not just enough to have a policy in place. You need to educate your employees about what constitutes sexual harassment because it is very complicated. It is not very simple sometimes, especially in the aggregate type of things.
Right.
A situation that don't seem like sexual harassment, but in the aggregate become sexual harassment. If I come in on Monday, I'm going to tell you, I like that tie. Not sexual harassment. Perhaps. But on Tuesday, hey, I like your jacket. On Wednesday, I love that shirt. On Thursday, I like those shoes.
Right.
Every day I've commented on your wardrobe, it can become a hostile work environment. It might not be pervasive, and one of those events may not be sexual harassment in and of themselves. And so it's really important for employers to educate their employees on what those lines are and how they work, because the historical sense of, oh, if I say, hey, you might get a promotion if you go on a date with me, that's the classic example.
Right.
But it's much more nuanced than that.
And not only training of the supervisors, the managers, but it's also talking to employees and making them feel comfortable to talk and speak out, because there is a stigmatism to women, like, I don't want to say something, I don't want to get in trouble. So you want to also get that message out to your employees, not only if it's happening to you or if you're seeing it happen to someone else. Please feel free and comfortable to come talk to us because we will keep you confidential and private. So it's training of the supervisors and managers and making the employees feel safe and comfortable.
Yeah, a good policy defines it and gives the clear path.
What would both of you say to individuals who say, and I've heard this conversation myself, you know what, I'm never going to put myself in a position in terms of being in an office with a closed door with a woman because I don't want anything to be misconstrued. When I hear that, what crosses that mind is, number one, if you're not going to do anything wrong, then why should you have to worry about that? But B, that puts the woman in a career disadvantage, because you may not have a problem with having that kind of closed-door conversation with a male employee, but if the supervisor feels that they cannot be in that position with a woman, the woman may not feel like they have the same opportunities in the workplace that the man has.
You have to be careful of discrimination on both sides. Sexual harassment is a form of sexual discrimination, but you can't also discriminate on the other end by not allowing them to participate in closed-door conversations you would have with someone else, or to go to the all-boys club type thing. So yeah, you have to be careful not to overcompensate by leaving them out.
Well, that goes back to the education piece we just talked about. You know, both genders, and it's not about man versus woman or woman versus man, it can be amongst the same gender, need to feel comfortable being in the same place with each other in a confined environment, whether it be maybe after hours or off the workplace. I mean, these things can happen anywhere, but if you're educated as to what it is and how to avoid it, there should not be a problem there, and everyone should feel comfortable because you have the right policy in place that everyone's agreed to. Everyone understands the parameters around what's going on, and you can eliminate that issue.
You know, we are seeing, in terms of the cases that are out there and the large settlements that are out there, that what could happen to employers and employees if they don't do anything about a situation. But are there still companies out there who are not taking this seriously, and when situations, legitimate situations come along, they're more apt to try to get past it rather than deal with whatever culture is taking place in their company?
Retaliation is a big fear. It's against the law to retaliate, but if you're a woman and you have this experience, then the employers sometimes will tell you, go ahead, do something and you'll lose your job. The thing is, as an employer, you're not allowed to retaliate, but all of a sudden you're getting written up for things like not doing your job properly, or your performance starts to go down, when that's not really true and they just hide it. So it is very scary for a woman to come forward, and employers can play the games if they wanted to.
Kevin, we hear those stories all the time. Do you think, because of what we're hearing in the national news, that companies are rethinking those situations in terms of being more aware of what's happening from top to bottom in the company, and making sure that women or men are not put into that situation?
I think so, and I hope so. It's really unfortunate that anyone would come to work and feel like they are unable to perform or be a part of the team in any different way because they feel like they're in a hostile work environment, or they feel like they're being taken advantage of. And if people didn't understand what was happening before, perhaps what is happening now in the media is really exposing the liability that a company can be putting forth, whether it be from a legal perspective or a PR perspective, but also you're costing yourself morale of employees. If people do not feel comfortable in the workplace, you are going to lose good employees, you're going to have trouble attracting good employees, and that affects the bottom line. And businesses are becoming acutely aware of that. It's not just about the good old boys or good old girls network. This is a problem. And if you're not taking care of it as an employer, your business will suffer.
Sarah, we only have a couple of seconds left in this segment, but HR departments are really where these things are supposed to be handled. But, you know, I recall situations where HR departments would have a huge stack of complaints about a manager or a supervisor. Nothing really kind of gets done until it's way too late.
Once someone complains, the HR person should have a procedure of an investigation. You have to be careful of privacy of the people involved. You would call in witnesses. You wouldn't say, did you see Sue do this to Joe? You would say, did you see anything happen? So you have to be very careful, but you should investigate every complaint, whether it's the person complaining says it happened to them, or they saw something happen to someone else.
All right, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back with final thoughts in a moment. Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Sarah, you know, I was watching CBS this morning after what happened with Charlie Rose, and one of the anchors said that she hopes that this is the moment that both companies large and small and women everywhere finally say that there is no tolerance at all for situations like this, because of everything that's been happening from the world of journalism to entertainment to politics. Do you have any faith that we're having a collective moment where things really will change? You're laughing already.
I hope this helps women to come out and speak out, not only for themselves, but for others, because if it's happening to you, it's happening to other people. And I think it's embarrassing for a woman. There's this, it's hard for a woman to come out and speak out. So I hope this is a moment when it says to women, speak out for yourselves and for those that are coming behind you, because if you don't speak out for yourself, at least do it for those who are coming.
Kevin, what's happening in the local business community? Is the Chamber of Commerce or any other organization reaching out to companies and saying, look, if you haven't come up with a policy yet or new thinking about these things, you should be now?
Yeah, I think it's long since been evident, especially from legal employment law here in the community, that you need to get out there and do this. And if you are not doing it, there's a lot of compelling reasons to do it. You ask the question if this is the moment. Golly, you would think the moment would have already passed us. This should have been behind us. This should not be something that's still pervasive in the workplace. We know well enough what the problem is. We know how to handle it. It's too easy to handle it. And we need to put good policies in place that make those actors that might be engaged in this type of activity know that it's a zero tolerance workplace, know that we're a zero tolerance community, and this cannot continue.
Okay, thank you both. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's topic, the GOP tax plan. The plan passed the House last week, but its fate in the Senate is unclear. President Trump wants the bill to sign by Christmas. Will this be the first big win for the president or not? We went to Facebook to hear what some of you have to say. Barbara says it will hurt regular people. John says the only people who are in favor of the bill are those who are desperate for a political win and the minority of wealthy taxpayers who will benefit. And Kurt says, how can you justify a bill that eliminates tax breaks such as the teacher's $250 supply break, yet protects the tax break for golf country club owners and owners of private jets? Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And a reminder, you can get all the latest local and national news on our smartphone app. But if you are an Apple iOS user and have the old version of our app, it will go away at the end of the month. So iPhone users, you can find the new app by searching My Suncoast in the App Store. The app will update automatically for Android users. I want to thank both our guests for being here tonight, Attorney Sarah Blackwell and Kevin Cooper, the president of the Greater Sarasota Chamber of Commerce.